and started reading Srila Prabhupada's books. So I was born in Mumbai and we moved to the UK when I was about a year old, so I've been brought up in London. And we used to go to the temple in '76. But in 1981, we stopped going. Our family stopped going. I can tell you that's another story entirely. We won't get into why we stopped going. It's quite a funny story actually. But anyway, started going back in around 91, 92. I spent 3 years in America in high school, and I moved back to the UK. And 91, 92. I had lots of questions, so I was in the end of my high school kind of age, and I had so many questions about different things which I heard about or people had said, and I was wondering, and I used to go to different places. So I went to different Hindu organizations, different temples, different places of worship outside of the Hindu community. Also read so many different things. And I had such a kind of, I was thinking, like, I need to find some answers. And everyone who I go to, I'd be asking these different questions. And then I went back to the Bhaktivedanta Manor, which is where we used to go as a family many, many years ago. And I asked one of the brahmacharis there, a question, and we got into a conversation. And I saw the Bhagavad Gita on the table, and I just opened the Bhagavad Gita and came to a verse. And that verse, many of you know, it says, and that verse says that essentially the word, always offer your respects to me, offer your homage to me, worship me, and you will come to me without fail. But the end of that verse, the last line, that line says, I'm telling you this because you're my very dear friend. And that really struck me, because I thought, how can God be my friend? And I became quite interested in that concept. That wasn't the type of God that we had learned about in school. The God that we had learned about in school was a different type of God. And that got me interested. And then I thought, okay, I was about, how old was I? I was 18 at the time. And I thought, if religion, if something scriptural is right, if it's correct, if it's true, then the whole thing must be true. And if it's wrong, then the whole thing is wrong. If scripture is true, then it can't be that some of it's true but some of it's not. That was my thinking at the time. So then I thought, okay, the easy way to deal with this then is, let me just read the scripture, and if I find one mistake in it, then I don't have to follow it. So I read Srila Prabhupada's books across maybe about 2 years, 2.5 years. And I read Srila Prabhupada's books, all of his books, with one motive. And that motive was, let me find a mistake. Because if I find a mistake, then I no longer have to comply with all the stuff that I was supposed to comply with. But it was amazing because, first of all, I couldn't find a mistake. But the other thing that really struck me about Srila Prabhupada's books, which were different to many of the other books that I had read, was that they are so scientific. Like, I have a science degree, and I've always been interested in science, and they are so scientific in the sense that they are presented in a way which is so authoritative and is logical, and somebody of a rational mind. Because I come from not obviously, but I do come from a Hindu family, and we do all kinds of stuff which, to be honest, nobody knows why we do it or what the purpose is. And every time I'd ask somebody, the response would typically be, don't worry about it, just do it. And I remember going into a temple, not an ISKCON temple, some other temple, and there was somebody there dressed in orange, and it was some relative. They said, go and touch his feet. I don't want to touch his feet. But there's a million those people who come from a Hindu background, there's a million different forms of worship and puja and this and that. And what I'm finding, because I've been working with young people, with youth. We started a youth group to save the temple from closing down. So when I got involved in Bhaktivedanta, a couple of years later, you may or may not know, but there was a point in time when the government tried to shut the temple down. And when the government tried to shut the temple down, that actually for me was another reason why I got more committed, because we started a youth group and we started doing demonstrations in London and all of that kind of stuff. And we had, there was one protest, there was like 40,000 people in London marching to stop the closure. And what I've seen from the youth group then, which was in '94 up until now, and I'm still involved, is that there is a gap between previous generations who would follow something out of duty. They would follow something because they were told to do something, and then therefore they would do it. They didn't require an understanding of why I should follow it. But that's obviously changing. In the change in the state of the world and all the rest of it, young people are no longer willing to follow something just out of duty. They want to know why. And that's been something that's been existing in the West for generations beyond, right? So whereas India is quickly catching up to the West in many ways, some good, some not so good. And one of these things is this thing of actually challenging authority. So in the West, we're quite used to challenging authority. We've been doing that for a long time. Whereas in India, that hasn't been the case, but it is quickly becoming the case. And with the Indian, particularly in the younger generations now, there is this question about actually why should I follow something if I don't understand it? And therefore, actually religion is losing its relevance. Like historically speaking, there is this, have you heard of this Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha? Have you heard of that, those four words? So Dharma means basically religiosity, like being religious. Artha means accumulating wealth. Kama means satisfying your desires through your senses. And moksha means liberation. Yeah. So these were originally the four aims of the Vedas. It was described like that. Means the four the four material side aims of the Vedas. And that was typically seen as the purpose of religion. But what happens when society doesn't need to go to religion for Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha? So historically people would go to religion to get Dharma, to get Artha, to get Kama, and to get Moksha. How to learn to engage with these things. But now society doesn't need religion to tell them Dharma, apparently. Society doesn't need religion to tell them the difference between right and wrong. Right? So we feel that we can figure that out ourselves without religion. Artha, how to make money, for sure. Society doesn't feel like it needs to go to religion. For sense gratification, definitely not go to religion. And for moksha even, liberation, there's many different ways that people now are finding to get moksha, liberation, without religion. So, but the trouble is, of course, that these are not meaningful in the way that they were before. For example, if you look at Artha, Artha is the accumulation of wealth. So we all know in the world, people are making money in many different ways. They're not going to religion to find out how to make money, right? But in the Mahabharata, there's a very nice verse which talks about how Yudhishthira says that wealth, which is not earned in the right way, cannot be enjoyed. So religion doesn't just talk about the actual external of something. It talks about the underlying, the reason, the motivation, and the reason and the motivation change the result in a way that's not obvious when you first started. So these underlying subtle things, as opposed to the external gross things, are hidden. And because they're hidden, it makes it hard for a rational mind, and I'm thinking about younger generations who particularly have a rational, challenging mind, to accept those things. Why should I accept something without proof? And so that's like a big challenge for society right now. But it's answered in the Vedic texts and Srila Prabhupada's books in such a powerful way. Because it's answered in the way which is based on one's own experience as you apply a particular process. And the process of Krishna consciousness is like that. And one of the other things that I often, so I've as Navina was saying, like I have a involvement with the Avanti Schools Trust, and so we develop these schools, and they're faith schools, so they have Krishna consciousness at the center. And one of the questions we sometimes get asked is, for people trying to understand Hinduism, it's very hard for them to understand Hinduism because it's a very complicated religion. And one of the questions he asks is, okay, just tell me very simply, what are the 10 commandments of Hinduism? Right? So just tell me what the 10 commandments of Hinduism are. So anybody have an idea, what are the 10 commandments of Hinduism? There aren't 10 commandments of Hinduism, right? Because, yeah, come on, you want to have a go?
2. Always remember Krishna.
Okay, that's actually pretty close. As in, that's the essence. But in terms of a codified religion, it doesn't provide that, right? It is the essence, for sure. All the rules and scriptures point to these 2 rules. Always remember Krishna never again. But in terms of like that codified form of religion which they're expecting, it doesn't have that. And if you look at the Bhagavad Gita as a scripture, Krishna is not teaching like that either. Like where in any religious text in the world can you see God speaking to the devotee? So Arjuna is the devotee, Krishna is God, of course. God is speaking to the devotee. He's telling him, these are the different things that you can do. And at the end, he's telling him, okay, so now I've told you everything. You think about it and decide what you want to do. Have you seen that in the scripture? Now, that's because the commandment is not there in the way that, that people who ask the question have this perception that God must give us this 10 commandments, whatever it might be. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that it's not the way the Gita teaches. The way the Gita is teaching, Krishna is telling Arjuna, look, these are all the different choices in front of you. Right? These are all the different choices in front of you. This is where these different choices lead to. So if you take this choice, you'll go here. If you get this choice, you go, this happens, you do this, right? These are all the choices in front of you. Now, you choose where you want to go. You choose where you want to go, and then that's the choice you take. So Krishna's approach here, on the one hand, he's guiding Arjuna in a particular way, but in another way, he's leaving it to Arjuna to make a choice. Now, there is a hierarchy of choice. And Krishna explains the hierarchy of that choice as to where these different destinations are. Don't think that, all of these choices lead to the same place. They don't lead to the same place. A common misconception in Hinduism is everything gets to the same place. And that's made up. It's just not true. Like if I buy a ticket to New York, I'm going to go to New York. Why would I expect I'm going to go to Mumbai if I bought a ticket to New York? So it is true, Krishna says, that all beings follow my path. It is true that all of the different processes that Krishna recommends, not the made-up processes, but all the processes that Krishna recommends, do finally culminate in Krishna. But all of those require that culmination to happen through devotion, which is what Krishna concludes in the Gita. but he still gives Arjuna the choice. And that's a pedagogical, that's an educational approach, which is different. It's an approach which is, like, I'll give you another example. Like, if you look at our main text, like Srimad Bhagavatam is the other main text, right? So you have Srimad Bhagavatam and you have the Gita. Both of these things are conversations. So the Gita is a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. The Bhagavatam is a conversation within a conversation within a conversation within a conversation, right? Between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadeva Goswami, between Sutta Goswami and the sage of Namaskar, between Maitreya and Vidura, etc., etc., etc. There's different layers of conversation. Now that conversation is the exchange. Like in the Upanishads, it says that the teacher on one side, the student on the other side, and in between is education. It's an interesting definition of education. It's what arises between a conversation between two different people. The idea that it's not necessarily a didactic imposition on somebody else. It's actually the development of education through conversation, through questions and answers, or through some other form of conversation. And this provides us a clue into how we can engage younger generations in understanding the essence of what the Vedic scriptures provide us that goes beyond what most other systems of education can provide. And this approach is also the approach that underpins the Avanti Schools Trust in terms of what we're offering and the type of education that we're providing, which means that we are we're keen to develop a form of education which on the one side provides all the academic and etc. kind of results that you expect and should have, but also talks about their character and how they develop as individuals, their behavior, their responsibilities, etc., but also their spiritual understanding, and we call it spiritual insight, which means that they have an experience of spirituality. And one of my favorite verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam is a verse which talks about, it compares spiritual practice with eating. Like one of the questions that most people have about religion is it true? How do I know? That kind of question, right? Is it true? How do I know? Etc. etc. So this verse from the Bhagavatam is a really, really beautiful verse. So it says that just as when you're eating, three things are happening at the same time when you're eating. First thing that's happening is your hunger is going away. Yeah? Second thing that's happening is you're feeling nourished. Third thing is happening is you're feeling some pleasure from eating, assuming that it's food that you like. So these three things are happening. Is that fair? So these three things are happening simultaneously, they're happening at the same time, and they're happening as you eat. Now, if they were not happening, let's say you were eating, but your hunger was not going away, that would be quite strange, no? You'd have to question, am I really eating? If you were eating, but you were not feeling nourished, that would be strange also. You'd have to question, am I eating? And if you were eating something that you liked, and you were getting no pleasure from it, you'd also have to, what's going on here? So in the same way the Bhagavatam says, that should be the experience of your spiritual practice. If by practicing something spiritual, by practicing a religion, if these three things are not happening, what are they? The first one, if we are not becoming detached from material things, same as hunger going away, we're not becoming detached from material things. If we are not getting pleasure from that spiritual practice, a deep internal pleasure, just like we get pleasure from food. And if we are not developing our devotion and love for God, just like getting the nourishment from food, if these three things are not happening, pleasure, devotion, and detachment, if these three things are not happening, we should question, what are we doing? Am I actually following a real spiritual process. Now this is quite a challenge. It's a challenge because many people follow religious processes quite blindly, quite happily, just because our parents did, or our grandparents did, or everybody else is doing it, or that's what whatever the reasons are, but they're following it just blindly. But the Bhagavatam challenges us that if you are not feeling these three things, then you have to question, what are you doing? So in this way, I think I felt when I read Srila Prabhupada's books that here is a process which, and there are many other examples, it's just for the sake of time, I'm not going into it, but there are so many other examples where I felt like the Vedic texts themselves, particularly the Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam particularly, but also specifically the way that Srila Prabhupada has presented them, offer us such a rational, intelligent approach to what can be a very blind thing, i.e. practice of something spiritual, but also something which is which I couldn't find anywhere else, where I could ask a question, and instead of getting a response like something beyond my understanding, or just that it's written somewhere, I could get an answer that was really meant something to me, and that I could completely engage with and understand and relate to. And it gives us a practice which enables us to test whether we are progressing on a spiritual path that we expect to or not. So I thought I would pause there and just see if anybody has any questions or would like to make any comments before I say anything further, because I recognize I've said a lot, probably with an accent that might. Anyway, whatever. So any questions or comments anyone would like to make? Yes, sir.
I was thinking when you talk about the Ten Commandments and comparing them to Vedic philosophy, isn't it some yogis they speak about Yama and Niyama?
Yeah.
Couldn't that be?
Could be. I think for sure there are different structures. So you've got the four regulative principles that Srila Prabhupada talks about. You have Yam, Niyam, you have other kind of structures which kind of give the do's and don'ts, but they don't provide a central structure in the way that what these people were asking me about. They were trying to fix on something that how can I pin it down? How can I pin it down so that I can understand it? And yet we know, even without the Yam and Niyam, you can still follow a process of spiritual consciousness in the same way. So the only point I was making there was that it's so difficult to pin it down, and that's because it is such a wide tradition. Anything else? Yes.
Why is the Krishna-Avanti school is required? There are so many schools are available in the society.
Why is it required? There are so many other schools in society, and for us, when we started it, really the notion was, how can we give children a form of education which provides for them academically, that helps them to develop their own character, and gives them a sense of spirituality which is tangible for them. There are lots of religious schools, and we weren't really interested in creating a religious school. We were interested in creating a spiritual school where the form of spiritual practice becomes a positive experience for that child, so that they can engage with the world in a way where spirituality is tangible, where it's real, not theoretical. And I think that, for us, at least for me, I struggled to find that. There are about 7,000 religious schools in the UK, and many of them, I'm sure, are doing an incredibly good job. And but what we also find is that when it comes to religion, or it comes to, particularly if you take something like, we created our own course called Philosophy, Religion and Ethics. The reason why we did that is because in the West, when you talk about philosophy and ethics, basically you're talking about Athens and Rome. That's what philosophy and ethics stems for in the Western world. And that's understandable, because Western civilization has come from these two civilizations. But it ignores entirely the East. And the thing is that the Vedic perspective is so fundamentally, at an ontological kind of level, so fundamentally different to the perspective of some of the philosophy and ethics that come from Roman Athens, that it just felt like it was doing children a disservice to not expose them to that. And it's not to say one is right or one is wrong. It's to say that the world is becoming a small place. And for the children that we wanted to go through the system, we felt they needed to know, like, different worldviews. And at the same time, there's no question that for us, that the philosophy of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita just provides an incredible handbook to spirituality and living in the world, engaging with the world in a way that I just didn't see anywhere else. Like, just to give you a simple example, the Gita talks about this concept of the gunas, Sattva guna, Raja guna, Tama guna, right? So these three gunas. Now, some would say that, why is Krishna spending so much time on the gunas? He spends a lot of time in the Gita talking about the gunas. Now, the gunas are material. They are not spiritual. They are material things. Why is Krishna spending? He's only got 700 verses he's going to speak. He's speaking in less than 1 hour. Why he's speaking in the middle of a battlefield? He's speaking this for less than 1 hour. Why is he spending so much time talking to Arjuna about something material? Because the gunas, I did an MBA, and one thing I learned after I finished my MBA was at business school. One thing I learned after the MBA was that the best advice is in the Gita. Like, the gunas give you the best frame. MBA is all about frameworks. The gunas give you the best framework in the world. I've not seen anything that even comes close to it in terms of analyzing the world in a way that you can take control of a situation. Control, I mean it carefully, not no. You can understand and engage with the situation, and you can predict the outcome just by engaging with the gunas. You can get to spirituality by managing that process. Normally, if you engage with let's say there's an organization or a company that's failing. Somebody goes in to fix it. If they're going to fix it, the typical things that they'll go in and start doing are they'll change policies, they'll change the finances, they'll do kind of like that whole turnaround type stuff, right? Now that is all gross. It's pen and paper stuff, it's numbers, it's money, it's what it is, right? What's the harder thing to change? Okay, so let's take culture. Culture is very hard to change. Culture takes 10 years on average to change organizational culture, right? Why don't they change the culture first? Because it's harder. It's hard to get. It's much easier for me to change the accounts and the finance system and a policy than it is for me to change culture. Why? Because from a material perspective, there are gross things and there are subtle things. So it's easier for us to deal with the gross stuff. the tangible stuff, right? And we expect that the subtle stuff, the culture and the values and the ethics will follow. But that's actually, what's more powerful? Is it to change culture or is it to change the finance system? The more powerful point of change is the subtle. But the problem is, it's really hard. So, to give you an example, it's very easy for me to change my clothes, to put tilak on. That's very easy. For me to change my consciousness and my character is much harder. Right? But, now this is the genius of the gunas, or one of the geniuses of the gunas. The genius is, by changing the easy stuff, you can change the hard stuff. By changing the guna from Rajaguna to Tamaguna to Sattva, by changing the guna like that, Krishna says, it can help us change our consciousness. Because to directly change our consciousness is quite a hard thing. So these things help us support it. So I'm just giving this one example. There are so many examples that we could talk about. But the fact is that the Gita and the Bhagavatam are full of such knowledge that makes spirituality practical and applicable in our lives, as opposed to being something which is so esoteric or ununderstandable or distant that basically you're either following it blindly or you give up out of kind of desperation, because who can make sense of it? And yet Srila Prabhupada makes sense of it for us. Because if you go directly to try and read the Vedas and the Upanishads and these other texts, I can assure you, you'll have a tough time. Because they are at a level which is, you really have to understand the essence to even get something out of it. They can appear very impenetrable. But somebody who's just read one of Srila Prabhupada's small books, just one of Srila Prabhupada's small books, can understand the Vedic philosophy better than somebody who spent years studying it. Because Srila Prabhupada has crystallized that knowledge for us. And that knowledge, we felt, was absolutely essential for children to have access to. Otherwise, the material world is pulling in very different ways. And if children are not grounded, if they are not rooted in their spiritual identity, what identity will they attach themselves to? The material world offers many different identities. And we felt it was important for children, obviously children have different identities, but we felt that the most important and fundamental identity that every child should have, for their own, not because we're trying to spread a religion, but for their own happiness, for their own mental and emotional well-being, the most fundamental identity they should be attached to is their spiritual identity. And that's scientifically proven. It's scientifically proven by the work of Viktor Frankl and all of the psychology that developed from that work in the 1950s and 60s. Again and again, we know, whatever progression we're making in the material side, it's not keeping up with the decline in people's emotional, mental, and personal sense of happiness. Something's wrong. Something is not working. And the heart of that is the education system. We are not educating children, we are not empowering them, we are not enabling them to be happy. If you ask any parent, what do you want from your child? What do you want your child to do? They'll say all that kind of stuff, but when you come to the point, it's I want my kid to be happy. I want them to live a happy life. What else does any parent want for their child? They want them to be happy. What are you doing about it? We don't know, because we're not happy ourselves, how are we going to make our kid happy? And no matter how much we try and convince ourselves that by getting top grades, by getting the best job, no matter how much we try and convince ourselves that will lead to their happiness, it's a lie. It's a lie not just to ourselves, it's a lie to the children, and it's a lie that society keeps propagating. And it's a dangerous lie, because it's easy to believe, but it is a lie. We know. I'm not saying that, that's not my opinion. That's science. Every single every single study will tell you the same thing. By chasing material happiness, you do not get it. That's that's why we needed Krishna-Avanti, because we wanted kids to stop chasing after things which are an illusion. Sorry, that was a bit heavy. Didn't mean to be heavy. It's a serious subject, right? It's a serious subject. Okay. Come on.
Thank you so much for this introduction. I'm just a little bit curious about the outcome of these students who graduate.
Yeah.
You can just talk about it.
Yeah, the book is cheap. Book is cheap. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we have been running for just over 10 years. We've graduated. We haven't yet graduated the kids who started at age 4 and at 18, so they'll graduate in 2 years' time. I can say this though. Across all of our schools, the academic standards are extremely high, but that was always going to be the case. That's not the big deal. We have children of all different backgrounds, of all different religions. If you go to our schools and you ask the children what the favorite part of the day is, many, if not most, will tell you it's when they are engaging in spiritual activities like the Kirtan or like the philosophy, religion, ethics curriculum. When they're engaging in a conversation about philosophy, they may not call it philosophy, especially the younger ones, they may not call it philosophy, but it's philosophy. I remember one conversation just recently, like, they were talking about how God is everywhere. So a child asked, well, if God is everywhere, can I worship my pencil? Now, at a certain level, it's a silly question, but at a certain level, it's a very deep question. Now, in those ways of engaging with children, they can understand something. So we do feel that the outcomes in terms of what the school system is providing to those kids is something substantial in terms of their life experience and how they engage with the world. And we see now where we have more than 3,000 kids across the schools, again, like I said, of different backgrounds and religion. And we only have 2 children who don't attend, though they have a right not to attend. They don't attend the Kirtan, the IT, and the religious studies anymore, because they enjoy it, not because we're forcing them to, because they enjoy it. And just the fact that they enjoy it and are engaging with it and is an outcome. And another outcome I can point to is that we got the kids themselves to organize in the high school, for them to organize after-school activities. So they have these 3 different age groups, and once a fortnight, they have an after-school club where they have Kirtan, Prashad, lecture, question and answers, etc. They organize it themselves. They arrange the speakers. They arrange everything, and they get hundreds of kids coming. Now, those kids don't need to go. They can go home like every other kid. We have every year group goes to a different temple or like for a retreat for a week. Again, they don't have to go. So in terms of, like, if I show you the pictures of our festivals, of the Rath Yatras, of the Kirtans, of the Abhisheks, of the puja that goes in the classrooms, in the main shrines of each temple. So in the stores, every classroom has a little altar with Gauritai. And those deities, they can engage with those deities however they like. They can bring something to offer, they can dress, they can do whatever they want. There's no rules around that temple. And then there's a main temple, where there is either Gauritai, Krishna Balaram, or Radha Govinda, like that. There are rules. So we wanted them to have a balance. There are some spaces where you can develop a relationship very easily and without rules with God. There's a spontaneous relationship we want them to have, but there's also one of formality and worship, formal worship. So the different outcomes and ways that we will judge that I would say in the very early stages. When I don't come from an education background. When I first kind of thought of the idea, one devotee said to me, this is like a 10-year project. And I was thinking, this is like a 6-month project. How hard can it be to set up a school? Now I know what he meant. And in the scriptures it says to set up a school takes 50 years. Yeah, and I'm understanding now why. Because the system that we have, even though according to all the government standards and all the other standards, we're like right at the top, the fact is, according to the standards that we want for the school, will take a long, long time until those kids become teachers and their students become teachers, and that cycle goes, and that within every class you have essentially people of genuine, deep spiritual basis and grounding and realization. Until you have that, the school system is not working as it should. And therefore these things take time. So I think from my perspective, how are the outcomes? So far the early sprouts are looking nice, whatever, but in terms of where we need to get to, it's a long way. But I feel that as long as we stay on the right path, and that's guided by Srila Prabhupada's books and instructions that we're giving in there, that eventually we'll get them. And they'll make a real contribution to the world, actually. Because we have, in the UK, we have 35 Krishna consciousness societies across the country, in all the major universities. They have societies where students meet once a week. And these kids will go, they'll graduate, they'll come in they're coming in at 3 years old, they'll graduate high school at 18, they'll go to KCSOC, British Consciousness Society. So it's a lifelong thing. But I do think that this is the only way we can change society, is through the kids.
So when will you plan to open up schools here in Scandinavia?
Yeah, well, there are plans in motion. I understand that an application has actually already gone in to set up a school here in Denmark, and part of the reason, the only reason why I originally said I'd come across was to see if we can help in that process. And we had a meeting just earlier, and it feels like there is a lot of overlap, and that we could do something here in the form of an Avanti school. So I understand we're waiting for the result of the application. But yeah, we'll see what Krishna has in store for us.
Maybe soon enough you will come to Sweden also.
Yeah, you will see. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, I think we have. Okay, so one question, then we'll.
Can you please tell us the ratings of the Avanti among the others?
The ratings. To be honest, there's this saying that there are lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. So the thing with statistics is I can tell you lots of statistics that will impress you, and then I can also tell you some statistics which we generally don't say, which will not so impress you. But the thing is that they are good schools. Academic standards wise, they are very, very good schools. To give you an idea, probably the best kind of way to understand that is that for every place that we have, we generally have 5 to 10 people putting it as their first choice of preference. So we have waiting lists in the hundreds and thousands of people wanting to get into the schools. So people are moving house to get into the schools. People are doing lots of things to try and get into the schools. Sometimes I wish I could charge an admission fee, no problems. But they're doing well. I mean, I could standards wise they're doing well. But like I said, that's not our goal, to be honest. For us, the academic standards are just they're just a starting point. We've never had any doubt about the academic standards. For us, the real test is when these children graduate from our schools, what type of human being are they? And when they're in their 20s and their 30s and parents and all the rest of it, are they happy? Are they happy? And do they have a genuine sense of spirituality, which is real, not just something that they're doing because it's their religion and they were told to do it? But is it real for them? That, the kind of, the test of time. So, thank you all so much for listening so patiently. It was wonderful to be here, and I really appreciate your hospitality and wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Jai.
His Grace Navina Krishna Prabhu ki
Jai.